When I was 22, I started renting the downstairs apartment in my parents' house. The goal was simple: save money while still having a bit of independence. Even though my parents were gone fairly often, it never fully felt private. I still felt like I couldn't relax, couldn't have friends or girls over without feeling on edge. The downstairs apartment was separated from the rest of the house by a lockable door in the stairway. It was an open layout, with a small kitchen connected directly to the living room. Down the hall were my bedroom, bathroom, and laundry room, and there was a side entrance that led straight into the living room. This all happened over a weekend when my parents were away, which meant I could finally let loose. I had my friends Anthony and Jay over to hang out, drink a little, and watch a hockey game. Since my parents weren't home, we cranked the music and relaxed on the couch. I wouldn't say I was completely wasted, but I was definitely buzzing by the end of the game. When my parents were gone, I usually left the door between my apartment and the upstairs unlocked, since there was no chance of them coming down unexpectedly. I kept most of the drinks in the upstairs fridge because it was bigger and just worked better overall. Since Anthony and Jay had both driven and had been drinking, they decided to crash at my place. The couch downstairs was huge, big enough to comfortably sleep 3 people if you laid out the right way. After a long night, I said goodnight and went to my room. A few hours later, I woke up suddenly. It was still the middle of the night, maybe early morning. Almost immediately, I noticed what must have woken me: footsteps upstairs. Someone was walking around. I assumed it was Anthony or Jay heading up to grab water from my parents' fridge, so I didn't think much of it and closed my eyes again. A few minutes later, I heard something else. The sound of my bedroom doorknob turning. Someone tried to open it, but it was locked. I always lock my bedroom door just out of habit. I remember wondering why one of them would be trying to come in, but I was exhausted. I figured if I stayed quiet and pretended to be asleep, they'd give up and go back to bed. It sounds strange, but I just didn't have the energy to deal with it. It worked. I fell asleep not long after. The next morning, Anthony was already gone, but Jay was still passed out on the couch. When he heard me open the fridge, he slowly started staring, rubbing his eyes. I asked him if he had tried to come into my room the night before. He said no, at least he didn't think so, and admitted he didn't remember much because he'd gotten pretty drunk. We walked to a nearby deli, grabbed bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches and coffee, and ate in my backyard. He left shortly after, and I went on with my day. I never asked Anthony about it. Honestly, I didn't care that much. It didn't feel like a big deal at the time. I spent most of that Saturday out with other friends and didn't get home until late. I wasn't really drunk, more worn out than anything. I grabbed a snack, cleaned up, and went to bed. Well, went to bed meant crawling under the covers and watching TV for about an hour. Right after I turned it off, I heard creaks and thumps from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps again directly above me in the kitchen. I lay there, holding my breath, listening carefully. Then the noise stopped. My heart started racing, and a tight, uneasy feeling settled in my stomach as I sat there in the dark, waiting to hear anything else. Eventually, I forced myself to lie back down, telling myself it was just the house settling, old pipes, shifting floors, the kind of noises you only notice when it's dead silent. I convinced myself my paranoia was amplifying every creak and thump. I couldn't have been more wrong. I should have trusted my gut, because not long after, I heard it again, the sound of my bedroom doorknob moving. I shot upright so fast it felt like pure instinct, like my body reacted before my brain could catch up. The knob only turned for a couple of seconds, just like the night before, but this time it was followed by a soft knock, then the doorknob again. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my phone off the bed and started texting everyone: my parents, my family, Anthony, Jay. I knew the odds of it being one of my friends were basically zero, but I still hoped I'd see a message pop up saying, "Yeah, it's me." My parents didn't answer. They had to be asleep, and they weren't supposed to be home until Monday anyway. There was no chance I was about to ask, "Who's there?" Instead, I quietly slid out of bed and moved behind my dresser, gripping the closest blunt object I could find. My mind raced with the thought that whoever was outside the door might kick it in and rush the room. I swear I stood there frozen for 10 minutes. I didn't move, didn't breathe normally. There were no more knocks. Finally, I called 911 and whispered into the phone, trying to stay quiet while still being understood. I stayed on the line with the operator until police arrived, because I didn't feel safe leaving the room. I asked if she could have an officer come to my bedroom window. When I heard a soft tap from outside, I went to open it. Thankfully, I was on the first floor. I handed the officer the key to the side door, and moments later, I heard the entrance to my apartment open. Only then did I step out of my bedroom and meet two officers. I turned on all the lights. My apartment was small, with very few places to hide, so they cleared it quickly. Then we moved to the main floor, nothing. After that, we went upstairs. I told the officers what each room was before they entered. When they went into my parents' bedroom, I stayed in the hallway. About 30 seconds later, I heard raised voices and sudden movement. I peeked into the room just long enough to see two officers shouting at someone under my parents' bed. My stomach dropped. They told me to wait downstairs. A few minutes later, they walked down with a tall, dirty, terrifying-looking man wearing a sweatshirt and shorts. They asked if I knew him. I said no. The look he gave me, pure hate, was haunting. He looked homeless, unhinged, or both. Once he was out of the house, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The police told me that if we wanted to follow up, we could contact the precinct. After they left, I immediately texted every family and friend group I had. It was so late that only a few people responded. I called my parents first thing in the morning and told them everything. They were completely stunned, but since the man was homeless and nothing appeared to be stolen, they chose not to pursue legal action. I still wonder if I accidentally left the front door unlocked when Anthony and Jay were over and the guy just walked in while we were blasting music, or the more disturbing possibility that he'd been in the house much longer than that and none of us ever knew. I've always loved the quiet. That's why I moved out to this small cabin in rural upstate New York about 5 years ago, far from the noise and chaos of the city. The place is big, isolated, and surrounded by endless woods that stretch well beyond my property. The nearest neighbor is miles away, and most days the only sounds are wind moving through the trees and the occasional bird calling somewhere in the distance. It's peaceful, exactly the way I want it. Fishing is my escape. I spend hours on the lake behind my house, letting everything else fade away. I don't mind being alone. Honestly, I prefer it. The cabin has a wide deck that overlooks the woods, and most evenings I sit out there with a cold beer, watching the sun sink behind the trees as the forest settles into night. I listen to the sounds of the woods as they change after dark. For years it was calming, predictable, safe, until recently. About 2 weeks ago, something shifted. I was sitting on the deck like usual, staring into the darkness, when I heard a sharp snap, a twig breaking somewhere in the distance. I brushed it off. Deer, maybe a raccoon. The woods are alive, and I'm used to random noises. But over the next few days, the sounds became more frequent. At first, it was just rustling leaves or the occasional snap, things that could easily be animals moving through the brush. Then one night, I heard something different. A scratching sound. It came from the side of the cabin, near the spare bedroom window. It was faint, deliberate, almost careful, like whatever was making it didn't want to be noticed. I stood up from my chair, my heart beating faster than it should have. I waited, but the sound didn't come back. Probably a squirrel, I told myself. Still, something didn't sit right, so I went inside and locked up for the night. The next evening I heard it again. The scratching. This time it was closer, right outside the spare bedroom window. I froze, listening, my nerves starting to unravel. I couldn't explain it, but the feeling in my gut told me something was wrong. I walked over and pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. Moonlight spilled across the yard, casting long shadows from the trees. The air was completely still. Nothing moved. No animal, no person. I shook my head, blaming my imagination. Maybe it was a branch brushing the window, maybe the wind. I convinced myself there was nothing to worry about and went to bed. The following night, the scratching came back. But it wasn't just scratching anymore. It turned into light tapping, slow and deliberate, like someone knocking softly on the window, trying to get my attention. My heart jumped into my throat. I leaped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and crept down the dark hallway toward the spare bedroom. When I reached the window, I shined the beam outside. Nothing, no movement, just empty woods staring back at me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The air felt heavy, thick, wrong. I went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every noise felt amplified. Every creak of the floor sounded like footsteps. I lay there listening until exhaustion finally dragged me under. The nights passed, and the sounds didn't stop. Every night it was the same scratching, tapping, sometimes even a faint whisper that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. I tried to ignore it, but it was getting harder. Finally, one night I decided to confront whatever was causing it. Maybe it really was just an animal. A raccoon or something had gotten inside. I grabbed a crowbar from the shed just in case and went to the spare bedroom. When I opened the door, the air inside felt stale, untouched. I hadn't used the room in months. I swept the flashlight across the space, checking every corner, under the bed, behind the dresser. Nothing. I stood there in the silence, feeling foolish. The room was empty. Just the same old spare bedroom, unchanged and alone. But as I turned to leave the room, something caught my eye. The closet door was slightly ajar. I was sure I hadn't left it that way. My stomach dropped. I stepped closer, every movement slow and careful, and pulled the door open. The closet was empty, but when I shined the flashlight into the back corner, I saw something that made my breath hitch. A small piece of dark fabric was snagged on the edge of the wall, torn like it had been ripped from clothing. My thoughts spiraled. Had someone been here? Had someone been inside my house, inside my room? I backed out, my heart pounding so hard it felt painful, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I couldn't stay in that house another second. I stepped outside, hoping the cold night air would clear my head. Instead, the darkness of the woods felt like it was closing in, pressing against me from all sides. I tried to rationalize it: nerves, isolation, my imagination getting the best of me. That night, I slept on the couch with a baseball bat within reach. Nothing happened. No scratching, no tapping. The silence was complete, almost unnaturally so. The next night, I told myself I wouldn't be chased out of my own home. I was going to sleep in my bed and face whatever this was. But just as I started to drift off, I heard it again. Tap, 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 right against the window. I shot up, heart racing, grabbed the flashlight, and ran toward the spare bedroom without caring how loud I was. When I yanked back the curtain, I didn't just see the woods. I saw a shadow, a figure standing just outside the window, barely visible in the dim light. I froze. My blood went cold. I turned away, my mind spinning. Who was that? Why were they here? I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying it now. Someone had been outside my house, and they had been watching me. I ran to the phone and called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. When the operator answered, panic flooded my voice. "Someone's been outside my house," I said. "I think they're still here." I gave my address, and they told me help was on the way. I hung up and looked around, knowing I couldn't stay. As I reached for my jacket, I heard it a slow creak from the hallway. Someone was moving inside the house. I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the back door, flung it open, and ran straight into the woods. I didn't look back. Branches tore at me as I ran, my lungs burning with every step. When I reached the edge of the property, I saw flashing lights in the distance. I slowed, shaking, and hid behind a tree as police cars pulled up, officers moving in with their guns drawn. I didn't stay to see what happened. I couldn't. I knew that whatever or whoever had been in that house wasn't finished. I wasn't safe there anymore. I never went back. I later contacted the police to let them know I was alive so no one would come looking for me. The cabin is still there, alone in the woods, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the tapping. I don't know who was in my house or what they wanted, but I know one thing for certain. They were waiting for me, and they're still out there.
And thank you for watching my video and subscribe to my channel. It is my not it is my channel, it is your channel, and subscribe this channel for a new latest video. And my viewer, I tell you, this video is mental of entertainment only. Okay, the event and character show are functional, and my similarity to real life is purely coincidental.